Hey everyone, tonight we're unwrapping the sugary layers of history to explore something truly unique, the strangest royal wedding cakes throughout the ages. You might think of a royal wedding cake as a pristine, towering masterpiece of white icing, a symbol of elegance and tradition. But trust me, as we journey back through centuries, you'll discover that these edible monuments were often far weirder, more symbolic, and sometimes, frankly, a bit unsettling than anything you've seen on a modern reality TV show. So, you probably won't survive this day. If your idea of a wedding cake involves anything less than edible gold-hidden trinkets and perhaps a live bird or two. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And go ahead, drop a comment with your location and what time it is for you right now. Don't forget to like and follow the channel to continue waiting for the next exciting parts. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story, like most things, ancient and fascinating, begins not with sugar and tiered perfection, but with something far more humble, a simple symbolic bread. You have to picture yourself in ancient Rome, a place of grand amphitheaters and bustling forums, but where the concept of a cake, as we know it for weddings, was still millennia away. Here, the earliest form of wedding cake wasn't sweet at all. It was typically a small, dense loaf made of souse, spelt flour, and salt, often called confariatio. This wasn't for eating pleasure, mind you. Its purpose was purely symbolic, a central element of the most ancient and sacred form of Roman marriage ceremony, known as confariatio. The bride and groom would share this humble bread, breaking it together as an act of unity, signifying their shared future and common life. It was a ritualistic gesture rather than a dessert spectacle. This act of breaking bread wasn't just a quaint tradition, it was deeply steeped in religious significance. Spelt was a staple grain representing fertility and sustenance, while salt was a symbol of purity and preservation. So by sharing this simple loaf, you were essentially making a sacred vow before the gods, invoking blessings for a fruitful and enduring union. It was less about taste and more about testament. Historians still argue whether the confariatio bread was purely ceremonial, or if it had some minor nutritional value for the couple and select witnesses. But one thing is clear, it was far from the elaborate sugar creations we associate with royalty today. A quirky fact about Roman weddings, alongside the bread, they often included a ritual where the bride's hair was parted with a spear, symbolizing her transition from her father's household to her husband's. So a bland cake and a weaponized hairbrush, quite the romantic start, wouldn't you say? It really puts modern wedding anxieties into perspective. You might fret over seating charts, but at least you don't need a medic on standby for the hairdo. This Roman tradition of the symbolic bread laid the very earliest groundwork for the idea of a shared confection at a wedding, even if it was just a few steps above dry crackers. It was the primordial ooze from which all future glorious and often strange royal wedding cakes would eventually evolve. You were literally breaking bread, not breaking out the frosting. From the sturdy symbolic spelt bread of ancient Rome, we fast forward several centuries, landing squarely in the often muddy, perpetually hungry world of the European Middle Ages. Here, the concept of a wedding cake took a distinctly savory and frankly rather bewildering turn. Forget delicate sugar-spun creations. You're looking at something far more substantial and perhaps a little unsettling, the bride's pie. Imagine trudging through a muddy village street, arriving at a lord's hall, and being presented with this. It certainly wasn't Instagram ready. This wasn't a sweet dessert pie filled with apples or berries. Oh no. The bride's pie was a substantial, often multi-layered meat pie, brimming with various types of cooked meats like mutton, beef, or poultry. Think of it as the ultimate savory centerpiece for a medieval feast, a rich and hearty dish designed to feed a hungry wedding party, not just offer a delicate bite of sweetness. It was the main course, perhaps even the only course, depending on the status of the wedding. Historians still argue whether the bride's pie always contained a mix of meats, or if regional variations meant specific fillings were more common. But the general consensus is if you liked gravy, you were in luck. But the bride's pie wasn't just a delicious or, to our modern palates, perhaps a bit heavy meal. It often contained hidden elements, edible tokens baked right into the crust. You see, it was a common custom for guests to tear off pieces of the pie and eat them not just for sustenance, but for good luck. And within the pie, hidden rings or other small trinkets were often baked. Imagine biting into a succulent piece of mutton and hitting something hard. Congratulations, you found the lucky charm. This was believed to bring fortune to the finder, echoing later traditions of charms in Christmas puddings. It was a bit like a culinary treasure hunt, except the treasure might be slightly greasy. A quirky fact, given the lack of rigorous food safety standards, finding a metal ring in your pie might have been considered lucky, but also a dental hazard. You can practically hear the medieval dentists rubbing their hands together in glee. The pie itself often served as a focal point for various wedding rituals. Sometimes, instead of one large pie, there would be several smaller ones which guests would stack as high as possible. The bride and groom would then attempt to kiss over the top of the precarious stack, chuck, without knocking it over. If they succeeded, it was a good omen for a long and prosperous marriage. If not, well, let's just say, it made for a messy start to the reception. This tradition was less about the pie's taste and more about its role in a game of balance and public display of affection. It also served as a very practical way to use up leftover meat and ensure everyone got fed at a time when food scarcity was a real concern. The bride's pie truly represented the practical communal nature of medieval weddings. It was about shared sustenance, good fortune, and integrating the entire community into the celebration. You wouldn't find delicate sugar figurines or intricate piping here. The artistry lay in its sheer size and the anticipation of finding a hidden gem. It was a far cry from the dainty dessert that would one day grace royal tables, a culinary ancestor that reminds us just how much our ideas of celebration and indeed our palates have evolved. From the hearty meaty embrace of the medieval bride's pie, our culinary journey through royal wedding cakes takes a delightful and much sweeter turn. You're stepping into the opulent, often dramatic world of Yeast, Tudor England, where sugar, once a rare luxury, began to truly flourish as an artistic medium. Imagine the court of Henry VIII, a place of grand feasts and lavish displays where power and wealth were flaunted in every conceivable form, including the edibles. This era marked the genuine, sweet beginnings of the wedding cake as something truly designed for visual spectacle and delightful taste. Before this time, sugar was so expensive it was often treated more like a spice or a precious medicine used sparingly. But with the expansion of trade routes and the development of refining techniques, sugar became more accessible, albeit still a symbol of immense wealth and status. This allowed confectioners to experiment, moving beyond simple pies to more elaborate sculptural creations. You were no longer just eating your cake. You were admiring it, perhaps even marveling at the sheer expense of it. This was the dawn of modern sugarwork, as a true art form. The early Tudor cakes were still not the towering tiers we recognize today. Instead, they were often small, intricately molded pieces, sometimes made from marzipan almond paste and sugar, or a stiff sugar paste often referred to as subtleties. These subtleties were incredibly elaborate, sometimes depicting mythological scenes, heraldic beasts, or allegorical figures. They were designed to impress, to show off the host's wealth and the confectioner's skill. Imagine a tiny edible sculpture delicately painted with natural dyes gracing the royal table. A quirky fact, some of these sugar subtleties were so detailed they were more akin to miniature architectural models than something you'd immediately gobble down. You can almost hear the confectioners whispering, "Please don't eat the masterpiece." These early sweet confections would also incorporate spices like ginger cinnamon and nutmeg, reflecting the exotic tastes of the era and the growing accessibility of goods from far-off lands. The texture would have been dense, almost like a very rich fruitcake or marzipan loaf, a far cry from the light sponges of today. They were packed with flavor, reflecting their precious ingredients. Historians still argue whether the shift to sweeter cakes was driven purely by the availability of sugar, or if changing palates and an increasing desire for elaborate displays also played a significant role. Whatever the reason, this period clearly marks a pivotal moment. The focus was moving away from the communal breaking of bread or the sharing of a savory pie towards a more refined individual indulgence. This was the era where the cake began its ascent from mere sustenance to a symbol of celebration status and artistic endeavor. The delicate brown ink outlines you'd find on an illuminated manuscript miniature start to feel like the intricate piping on these early sugar creations, a testament to the meticulous craftsmanship of the age. As you picture these early sweet confections, imagine the subtle parchment texture of the vellum, almost like the refined sugar paste itself, signaling a new era of elegance, opulence, and perhaps a few more cavities for the royalty. From the intricate sugary subtleties of Tudor England, we now elevate our gaze quite literally to the dawn of the pork stacked delights. You're moving into an era where royal wedding cakes began to reach for the heavens, not just in ambition, but in actual physical height. This shift really took hold around the time of Dr. Charles II's reign. In England, a period of restoration and burgeoning grandeur after the austerity of the Commonwealth. Imagine emerging from a time of puritanical strictness into an age of renewed celebration and excess. And that exuberance definitely extended to the dessert table. Before this, cakes, even sweet ones, were often presented as single large blocks or individual pieces. But the concept of layering confections, building them upwards into impressive, multi-tiered structures, began to gain traction. This wasn't merely an aesthetic choice, it carried significant symbolism. Each tier could represent a different aspect of the union or the royal lineage, creating a vertical narrative of prosperity and continuity. You weren't just looking at a cake, you were looking at a sugary monument to power and succession. Historians still argue whether the invention of the multi-tiered cake was a direct English innovation or if it was influenced by continental European confectionery practices. However, its prominent appearance in English royal celebrations certainly solidified its place. The earliest multi-tiered cakes were not always as stable or as symmetrical as their modern counterparts. You can imagine the frantic efforts of bakers trying to balance these increasing heights, likely relying on internal supports made of wood or metal hidden beneath layers of rich fruitcake and early forms of icing. It was a delicate engineering feat where a slight tremor could mean a sugary catastrophe. A quirky fact, some early cakes were so precariously stacked that they required immediate carving and serving to prevent collapse, turning the cutting of the cake into a race against gravity. Talk about high-stakes dessert. These cakes, still typically dense fruitcakes, were adorned with more than just simple sugar work. They might feature elaborate sugar paste figurines, often depicting classical gods or allegorical scenes that celebrated love, fertility, and the glory of the monarchy. Royal coats of arms, monograms of the couple, and symbols of their respective families would be intricately crafted and applied, often gilded, with precious shell gold, giving them a truly regal sparkle. The vibrant colors of the Tudor era, saffron, indigo, russet, gave way to perhaps slightly more subdued, but no less opulent palates, reflecting a growing refinement in aristocratic taste. The increasing size and complexity of these cakes meant they became true centerpieces, drawing gasps of admiration from wedding guests. They were designed to impress, to underscore the wealth and power of the royal household, and to provide a lasting visual memory of the grand occasion. This wasn't just about feeding the masses. It was about spectacle, about creating an edible icon that would be talked about for years. As you envision these nascent towers of sweetness, picture them bathed in the soft glow of a flickering late 15th century illumination, each delicate brown ink outline hinting at the meticulous effort involved in stacking such grand symbolic delights. The wedding cake was truly on its way to becoming a masterpiece of edible architecture, foreshadowing even wilder designs to come. From the impressive, if sometimes wobbly, stacked creations of Charles II's era, we now plunge headfirst into the period of truly Georgian excess. Imagine yourself in the 18th century, a time of grand balls, powdered wigs, and an insatiable appetite for elaborate display. Here, royal wedding cakes weren't just big, they were eatable structures, pushing the boundaries of what was physically possible with sugar flour and a lot of ambition. This was the era when confectioners became architects and the wedding cake transformed into a monumental, often precarious statement piece. The drive for grandeur during the Georgian period was relentless. It wasn't enough for a cake to be merely tasty or even just multi-tiered. It had to be a spectacle, a conversation starter, a visual representation of the monarch's power and the family's prestige. Confectioners would compete to create the most outlandish and intricate designs, often incorporating classical motifs, miniature temples, or even whimsical pastoral scenes, all crafted from sugar paste and royal icing. You might see tiny sugar fountains, delicate columns, or edible figurines of cupids and allegorical virtues all perched precariously on layers of rich fruitcake. Historians still argue whether this era's extreme ornamentation was purely for aesthetic show, or if it also served as a subtle display of colonial wealth given the sugar trade's burgeoning importance. These cakes were engineering marvels of their time. Without modern refrigeration or advanced structural supports, bakers relied on sheer skill, dense recipes, and often internal wooden dowels or even metal frameworks to hold up their colossal creations. The biggest cakes could weigh hundreds of pounds, requiring multiple strong men just to transport them to the banqueting hall. Imagine the collective gasp or perhaps nervous coughs as such a behemoth was wheeled in. A quirky fact, some bakers became so famous for their structural cakes that they were almost considered celebrity engineers, revered for their ability to defy gravity with flour and sugar. You might have preferred a steady hand over a sweet tooth if you were one of their apprentices. The dominant cake of choice remained a very rich fruit cake, packed with dried fruits, nuts, and enough spirits to preserve it for what felt like eternity. This density provided the necessary structural integrity for the towering designs. The icing, a hard royal icing made from egg whites and sugar, was crucial not only for decoration, but also for stability drying to a rock-hard shell that helped to hold everything together. This meant the cutting of the cake was often less a delicate slice and more an athletic endeavor requiring a sturdy knife and considerable strength. These Georgian creations truly set the stage for the iconic royal wedding cakes of later centuries, cementing the idea that the cake should be a magnificent, towering centerpiece. They were a testament to human ingenuity, artistic flair, and a distinct lack of concern for subtlety. As you envision these edible structures, imagine the subtle parchment texture of an illuminated manuscript, almost as if the very vellum is trembling slightly under the imagined weight of these audacious, sugar-laden dreams. The Georgian era didn't just want cakes. They wanted edible monuments to their own extravagance. Moving on from the grand towering and often wobbly confections of the Georgian era, we arrive at a truly pivotal moment in royal wedding cake history, a point where tradition symbolism and a distinct aesthetic began to crystallize. You're stepping into the Victorian age, an era defined by propriety, burgeoning industrialization, and the immense influence of one woman, Queen Victoria. Her wedding to Prince Albert in 1840 didn't just set a fashion trend for white wedding dresses. It forever changed the face of the royal wedding cake, ushering in the undisputed reign of wax white icing. Before Victoria cakes could be various colors, often reflecting the natural hues of their ingredients or whatever dyes were available. But Victoria's cake was revolutionary. It was a massive three-tiered fruit cake, weighing an astonishing 300 pounds and covered entirely in pristine white royal icing. This wasn't just any white. It was an almost impossibly brilliant pure white achieved through meticulous preparation. This specific type of icing became known as royal icing, precisely because of its association with this wedding. You can imagine the murmurs of admiration, the gasps at its flawless snow-like appearance. Historians still argue whether the choice of white was solely for aesthetic purity, or if it also subtly linked to the innocence and virginity associated with the bride, a common Victorian ideal. The sheer scale of Victoria's cake was impressive, but its unbroken white surface was what truly set it apart. This decision cemented white as the definitive color for royal wedding cakes, a tradition that would endure for centuries. It symbolized purity, elegance, and the burgeoning wealth that allowed for such a refined, pristine display. White sugar, being expensive and difficult to refine to such a degree, was a clear marker of status and luxury. A quirky fact before Victoria, sometimes even savory pies were dyed to match the wedding colors. Imagine a bright blue meat pie. Certainly memorable, but perhaps not appetizing. Beyond the color, Victoria's cake also popularized the multi-tiered structure, reinforcing the trend that had begun in earlier periods. These tiers would typically be separated by pillars or other decorative elements, creating a sense of height and grandeur. The cake itself remained a rich fruit cake, a practical choice given its ability to age well and support heavy decorations. This dense base was essential for what was to come as confectioners continued to push the boundaries of edible art. The impact of Queen Victoria's wedding was monumental, not just for cakes, but for many wedding traditions we recognize today. Her choices, driven by personal taste and the values of her era, quickly castled down through society, setting precedents that even commoners would aspire to emulate. So when you look at a pristine white wedding cake today, know that you're witnessing a direct descendant of Victoria's revolutionary confection. It was less a dessert and more a cultural declaration, solidifying the idea that a royal wedding cake should be a towering, glistening beacon of purity and opulence, perfectly fitting for the new age of empire. With Queen Victoria's wedding having firmly established the supremacy of the grand white-iced royal cake, confectioners and royal planners turned their attention to the exquisite details. You see, a cake wasn't just a cake. It was a canvas, a sugary testament to the values and aspirations of the era. And in the highly symbolic Victorian period, every flourish, every delicate motif was imbued with meaning. This is where we delve into the intricate world of orange blossom and other allegorical decorations that adorned these majestic confections. The papon orange blossom bestek became the undisputed floral motif for Victorian royal wedding cakes, largely thanks to Victoria herself. She wore a wreath of fresh orange blossoms in her hair on her wedding day, a choice that instantly popularized the bloom. But why the orange blossom? It wasn't just pretty. It was deeply symbolic, representing fertility and purity. Jai. The orange tree famously bears both flowers and fruit simultaneously, making it a perfect metaphor for a fertile union that would quickly yield heirs to the throne. You can imagine the murmurs among the guests, admiring not just the beauty, but the hopeful symbolism meticulously crafted into the sugarwork. Historians still argue whether the orange blossom symbolism was widely known before Victoria, or if her choice specifically elevated its status in wedding lore. Regardless, its prominence became undeniable. Confectioners would craft incredibly delicate sugar paste orange blossoms, often with tiny gilded stamens or subtle pearl accents, and arrange them in elaborate garlands or clusters around the tiers of the cake. These weren't just flat drawings. They were three-dimensional works of art, each petal a testament to the baker's skill. Imagine trying to pipe a tiny lifelike flower out of stiff icing, perfectly positioning it on a surface that was likely several feet above your head. It required incredible precision and a very steady hand. A quirky fact, some royal cakes even incorporated actual silver or gold leaves amongst the sugar flowers, blurring the line between edible art and precious jewelry. Talk about a fancy garnish. Beyond the orange blossom, Victorian royal cakes were often laden with other allegorical figures and symbols. You might find sugar cherubs representing love, cornucopias overflowing with edible fruits symbolizing abundance, or even miniature scenes depicting significant moments from the couple's courtship, or heraldic crests celebrating their families. These weren't random choices. Each element was carefully selected to convey messages of prosperity, fidelity, and the continuity of the royal line. The entire cake became a condensed edible narrative of hope and aspiration for the new union. The royal icing itself, the pristine white foundation, was not merely smooth. It was often elaborately piped with intricate scrollwork, lacework patterns, and garlands almost like a textile woven from sugar. This complex piping added layers of visual texture and further demonstrated the confectioner's mastery. The royal wedding cake, under Victoria's influence, became a harmonious blend of grand-scale, pristine color and deeply meaningful, delicate adornment. It was the ultimate edible symbol of a new era, reflecting a refined taste and a profound belief in the power of symbolism, all baked into a towering, fruit-filled monument of sugary hope. As the Victorian era blossomed into the early 20th century, the grand, white-iced and richly symbolic royal wedding cake had firmly cemented its place as an indispensable part of British regal celebrations. You're now seeing the consolidation of a particular culinary choice that would define royal cakes for decades, almost to the exclusion of all others: the fruitcake tradition. This wasn't just a preference, it became the undisputed standard, a rich, dense confection that was as much a part of the wedding as the vows themselves. Why fruitcake? It might seem an unusual choice to modern palates accustomed to light sponges and creamy fillings, but the reasons were incredibly practical and deeply rooted in the historical context. Firstly, fruitcake is incredibly sturdy. Its dense, heavy consistency, packed with dried fruits, nuts, and often soaked in brandy or rum, made it the perfect foundation for the towering, multi-tiered constructions that had become fashionable. You simply couldn't build a 7 or 8 foot tall cake out of a delicate sponge without it collapsing into a sugary mess. Its structural integrity was paramount. An authoritative historical fact, a traditional royal fruitcake could often take months to prepare, with the fruit being steeped in alcohol for extended periods to deepen the flavor and aid preservation. This wasn't a last-minute bake sale, it was a long-term project. Secondly, and perhaps even more importantly for royal purposes, fruitcake has exceptional longevity. Unlike lighter cakes that spoil quickly, a properly made and stored fruitcake can last for years, even decades. This was crucial for royal weddings, where slices of the cake were often sent out to dignitaries, military personnel, and even members of the public long after the ceremony. It also allowed for the curious tradition of preserving a top tier for the christening of the couple's first child, a sweet callback to the wedding day years later. Imagine having a piece of your parents' wedding cake on your own christening day. Talk about a vintage dessert. A quirky fact, some slices of royal wedding cake have been preserved for well over a century and have even been put up for auction, fetching surprisingly high prices. Just don't ask about the taste. The fruit cake itself would be covered in a layer of marzipan, providing a smooth canvas and then topped with a thick coating of royal icing, that pristine white hard sugar shell popularized by Queen Victoria. This icing not only provided a beautiful, unblemished exterior for intricate decorations, but also served as another protective layer, sealing in the cake's freshness. The flavor, thanks to the rich fruits and spirits, was deep, complex, and mature, very much reflecting the serious, dignified nature expected of royal unions. This unwavering commitment to fruitcake meant that even as culinary trends evolved, the royal wedding cake remained a bastion of tradition. It was a tangible link to the past, a symbol of stability and continuity in an ever-changing world. Historians still argue whether this adherence to fruitcake was purely practical, or if it also reflected a cultural conservatism within the monarchy, preferring established customs over fleeting fads. Whatever the deeper reasoning, when you picture a royal wedding cake from the early to mid-20th century, you're almost certainly envisioning a colossal white-iced fruitcake, standing proudly ready to defy both gravity and time. As the fruitcake solidified its reign as the royal wedding cake standard, its immense size and longevity brought with them a unique set of challenges. You see, when you're dealing with a multi-tiered, hundreds of pounds edible monument destined for a grand palace, simply moving it from the bakery to the banqueting hall becomes an epic undertaking. This section delves into the often unseen royal cake transport challenges, replete with logistical nightmares and a few genuinely humorous anecdotes that highlight the delicate dance between culinary ambition and practical physics. Imagine the scene: a bustling London street perhaps a few decades ago, and suddenly you spot a colossal white-iced structure carefully cradled in what looks like a specially built wooden crate being gingerly maneuvered by a team of uniformed men. This wasn't a job for a standard delivery van. Royal cakes, especially the truly massive ones, required bespoke transportation arrangements. Sometimes sections of the cake would be baked and decorated off-site, then carefully assembled. Brews. The palace often requiring scaffolding or custom-built platforms to reach the upper tiers. The logistics involved were more akin to moving a delicate piece of architecture than a dessert. An authoritative historical fact: the 1947 wedding cake for Princess Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth II, was so large and complex that it had to be transported in sections from a bakery in Reading, then assembled and decorated on-site at Buckingham Palace. The fear of mishap was constant. A sudden jolt, a misplaced step, or even an unexpected gust of wind could spell disaster for hours, if not weeks, of meticulous baking and decorating. You can almost hear the bakers holding their breath, their hearts pounding with every creak of the wooden crate. There were undoubtedly whispers of near-misses, tales of nervous chauffeurs navigating tight turns, and anxious royal aides pacing back and forth. A quirky fact: some sources suggest that on more than one occasion, special police escorts were needed to clear the roads for the cake's journey, ensuring no unforeseen traffic jams could jeopardize its safe arrival. Imagine getting stuck in traffic behind a giant wedding cake. It puts a whole new spin on road rage. The internal supports for these cakes were themselves feats of engineering. Wooden dowels, metal rods, and sturdy cake boards were carefully placed to distribute the immense weight of each tier. Even with these supports, the sheer bulk of the fruitcake meant that any sudden movement could cause cracks in the pristine royal icing or even structural failure. Bakers would painstakingly repair any minor damage on arrival, working through the night to ensure the cake looked absolutely flawless for the grand unveiling. These transportation sagas, while perhaps not as glamorous as the wedding itself, underscore the immense effort and precise planning that went into every aspect of a royal celebration. They were a testament to the dedication of the royal confectioners and the myriad staff who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Historians still argue whether the complexity of royal cake logistics truly added to their mystique, or simply presented an unnecessary challenge given the inherent fragility of such edible monuments. Whatever the case, getting these towering, sweet structures from oven to table was always a nail-biting adventure, a silent drama playing out amidst the pomp and circumstance of a royal wedding. From the logistical marvels of transporting colossal royal cakes, we now shift our focus to a more somber, yet equally fascinating period. Post-war austerity. You're stepping into an era where even royal celebrations had to contend with the stark realities of rationing and national hardship. Imagine a time when sugar, eggs, and butter were precious commodities, and even the monarch had to make do with less. This section explores how royal wedding cakes during periods of scarcity reflected the challenging circumstances of the nation, proving that even pomp and circumstance bowed to practical necessity. The most poignant example of this is the wedding of Princess Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth II, to Prince Philip in Yeast, 1947. Just 2 years after the end of World War II, Britain was still grappling with severe rationing. Food, including basic ingredients like sugar, was strictly controlled. This meant that the creation of a grand royal wedding cake, a traditional symbol of abundance, became a poignant reflection of the nation's resilience and resourcefulness. You couldn't just order up hundreds of pounds of sugar. It had to be sourced often through extraordinary means. An authoritative historical fact, due to post-war rationing, many of the ingredients for Princess Elizabeth's wedding cake were either donated by sympathetic Commonwealth countries like dried fruit from Australia or sourced from existing ration allowances. This cake truly became a symbol of global support and national effort. Despite the limitations, the desire for a majestic cake remained. The official cake for Elizabeth and Philip was a towering 9-foot-tall 4-tiered fruitcake weighing 500 pounds. It was nicknamed the 10,000-mile cake because its ingredients were gathered from across the Commonwealth. This symbolized not just the reach of the British Empire, but also the collective spirit needed to rebuild after the war. Imagine the bakers meticulously measuring out precious rations, turning humble ingredients into a magnificent symbol of hope. It was a testament to their ingenuity and dedication under pressure. However, the austerity wasn't just about ingredients. The very display of wealth was tempered by the national mood. While still grand, these cakes were perhaps less overtly extravagant than their pre-war counterparts. They symbolized continuity and resilience rather than boundless opulence. The white royal icing remained a nod to Victorian tradition, but the underlying message was one of shared national struggle and optimism for the future. A quirky fact, because the ingredients were so precious, there were even reports of concerned citizens sending in their own sugar rations to contribute to the royal cake, a truly sweet gesture of national solidarity. This period demonstrates that royal wedding cakes are not static symbols. They adapt and evolve, reflecting the broader historical context. The cakes baked during these austere times were not just desserts. They were edible representations of national spirit, hope, and the quiet determination to rebuild. Historians still argue whether the perceived modesty of these cakes was a deliberate choice by the palace to connect with the public's hardship or simply a forced adaptation to unavoidable material constraints. Regardless, these cakes served as poignant reminders that even in times of scarcity, joy, tradition, and a good old fruitcake could still find a place at the royal table. Having explored the cakes of austerity symbolizing national resilience, we now turn our attention back to the iconic confection that stood as a beacon of post-war optimism. Queen Elizabeth II's wedding cake. Her marriage to Prince Philip in 1947 was not just a personal celebration for the royal family. It was a desperately needed morale booster for a nation still grappling with the grim realities of rationing and reconstruction after World War II. You can imagine the public weary from years of conflict looking to this event as a symbol of new beginnings and brighter days. The official wedding cake, provided by McVitie and Price, a detail worth noting for its enduring British legacy, was a truly majestic creation. It was a towering 4-tiered fruitcake reaching an impressive 9 feet high and weighing a colossal 500 pounds. This wasn't just a cake, it was a carefully crafted message to the world. Its sheer size and grandeur, despite the prevailing rationing, were a testament to the nation's determination to reclaim a sense of normalcy and celebration. Imagine the scale of it, dwarfing even the most elaborate modern wedding cakes you might have seen online. An authoritative historical fact, the cake was famously dubbed the 10,000-mile cake, due to its ingredients such as dried fruit from Australia and rum from Jamaica being sourced from across the Commonwealth as gifts symbolizing the unity and global reach of the British Empire, even in challenging times. The cake's decorations were meticulously designed to convey messages of hope, prosperity, and the couple's personal journey. It was adorned with intricate sugar paste decorations, including the royal coat of arms, the monograms of Princess Elizabeth and Philip EP, for Elizabeth and Philip usually intertwined, and figures depicting their personal interests and hobbies. You would have seen representations of the household cavalry Philip's regiment, naval anchors, his background, and even intricate sugar paste orange blossoms, a nod to Queen Victoria's own wedding cake and a symbol of fertility and purity. A quirky fact, some reports suggest that a few of the ingredients were sent to the bakery via diplomatic pouch, ensuring their safe and timely arrival for such a momentous creation. Imagine a diplomat carrying a bag of currants. The process of creating such a monumental cake was a true feat of culinary engineering and artistry, particularly under the constraints of the time. The cake was baked in sections and then painstakingly assembled and decorated on-site at Buckingham Palace, requiring immense skill and teamwork from the confectioners. The final product was a gleaming white monument of royal icing, its layers of rich fruitcake, providing the necessary sturdy foundation for the intricate decorations. This cake wasn't just a dessert for the wedding feast, it became a powerful emblem of post-war resurgence. It represented the continuity of the monarchy, the hope for a new generation, and the quiet resilience of a nation rebuilding itself. Historians still argue whether the scale and opulence of Elizabeth's wedding, including the cake, was a wise move to boost national morale, or if it risked appearing tone-deaf during a period of widespread hardship. Regardless, its impact was undeniable, setting a new standard for royal confections that blended deep tradition with a palpable sense of optimistic renewal. You've just admired Queen Elizabeth II's majestic post-war wedding cake, a towering symbol of national unity and hope. But beyond the sheer size and the orange blossoms, these royal confections carry deeply personal and dynastic messages, often subtly woven into their very design. This is where we explore the intricate art of incorporating monograms and mottos, adding a layer of personal touch and dynastic pride to these edible masterpieces. Imagine peering closely at the pristine white royal icing and discovering not just delicate scrollwork but the beautifully intertwined initials of the bride and groom. These are the royal monograms, often executed in exquisite piped sugarwork or even crafted from edible gold or silver leaf. For Elizabeth and Philip, you would have seen E and P gracefully entwined, a visual shorthand for their union that was both intimate and grand. These monograms weren't just decorative, they served as a permanent, albeit edible record of the royal couple, making the cake uniquely theirs while still steeped in tradition. An authoritative historical fact, the use of personal monograms on royal wedding cakes became a common practice from the Victorian era onwards, reflecting a growing emphasis on the individual identity of the royal couple within the broader dynastic context. Beyond the initials, some royal cakes have also featured personal mottos or significant phrases. While not as universally present as monograms when they did appear, they added a profound layer of meaning, often reflecting the couple's values, aspirations, or even a subtle nod to their heritage. These mottos could be piped in elegant script around the base of a tier or integrated into a decorative panel. Imagine the silent contemplation of guests reading a carefully chosen phrase that encapsulates the spirit of the royal union, perhaps a promise of duty, love, or fidelity. Historians still argue whether the specific placement of these personal touches was a strategic choice to connect with the public, or simply an aesthetic preference of the royal couple and their confectioners. The artistry involved in piping these intricate details was immense. Bakers would often use tiny piping bags with minuscule nozzles, meticulously tracing the letters and flourishes onto the hardened royal icing. This wasn't a quick job. It required a steady hand, unwavering patience, and an artist's eye for symmetry and elegance. A slight tremor could ruin hours of work. A quirky fact: some very detailed monograms and crests were so complex that bakers would sometimes pipe them onto parchment paper, first let them dry, and then carefully apply the hardened sugar pieces to the cake, almost like edible decals. This technique, known as run-out or flooding, allowed for incredible precision. The incorporation of monograms and mottos transformed the wedding cake from a generic symbol of celebration into a deeply personalized artifact. It allowed the royal couple to subtly stamp their unique identity onto a centuries-old tradition, blending the formality of their public role with the intimacy of their private vows. These edible insignia served as a constant reminder of whose special day it truly was, a delicate signature on a magnificent edible canvas. It's a testament to how even the most rigid traditions can find space for individual expression, albeit in very refined, sugary forms. Having explored the personalized touches of royal monograms and mottos, our journey through royal wedding cakes now takes a detour across the globe, reaching out to the far-flung corners of the British Empire, or more accurately, the Peace Commonwealth. You see, these grand confections weren't just about British ingredients. They often subtly or sometimes overtly incorporated Commonwealth flavors and influences, becoming a delicious symbol of global connections and shared heritage. Imagine a rich fruit cake brimming with candied fruits and realizing that those vibrant pineapple chunks came from faraway Jamaica, or the plump raisins from sun-drenched Australia, or the fragrant spices from India. These weren't just random additions. They were deliberate choices, often gifts from Commonwealth nations eager to contribute to the royal celebration. This tradition was particularly strong during periods when the Commonwealth's role was emphasized, such as the post-war era, when ingredients for Elizabeth II's cake were famously sourced from across the globe. An authoritative historical fact, the 10,000-mile cake for Queen Elizabeth II's wedding explicitly highlighted its Commonwealth ingredients, turning the cake itself into a symbolic representation of imperial unity and global reach. This integration of international flavors served multiple purposes. Firstly, it showcased the vast reach and diverse resources of the Commonwealth, transforming the wedding cake into an edible map of the empire. Each bite could, in a way, connect the royal couple to subjects from myriad lands. Secondly, these exotic ingredients often added layers of richness and unique flavor profiles to the traditional fruitcake, elevating it beyond a simple British staple. You might find a hint of Caribbean rum, a touch of Australian sultanas, or the subtle warmth of spices from the Far East. A quirky fact: given the sheer volume of fruit needed for these massive cakes, you can almost picture dedicated Commonwealth officials carefully selecting and dispatching crates of the finest produce, imagining their contribution ending up on the royal table. It was a sweet form of diplomatic gift-giving. The visual decorations, too, could sometimes reflect these global influences, though often in a more subtle way. While the white royal icing and orange blossoms remained dominant, there might be delicate sugar paste motifs inspired by the flora or fauna of Commonwealth countries, or heraldic symbols representing their contributions. It was a delicate balance between maintaining British tradition and acknowledging the diverse tapestry of nations within the royal family's wider influence. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of Commonwealth ingredients was a genuine celebration of diversity or a strategic move to reinforce imperial ties during periods of shifting global power dynamics. Regardless of the deeper motivations, the presence of Commonwealth flavors in royal wedding cakes made these confections truly unique, adding a layer of hidden depth and international significance. They transformed a simple dessert into a powerful symbol of interconnectedness, reminding everyone that the royal family's reach extended far beyond the shores of Britain, connecting them to a global network of cultures and peoples through the shared sweetness of their most important celebratory feast. It was a tangible, delicious representation of a sprawling, diverse legacy baked into every rich, fruity slice. From the globally influenced fruitcakes of the Commonwealth era, we pivot to a cake that captivated the world with its sheer scale and fairy tale romance: Princess Diana's wedding cake. Her marriage to Prince Charles in 1981 was a global event, watched by millions, and every detail, especially the cake, was expected to be nothing short of spectacular. You can still recall the images: the voluminous dress, the loving glances, and then the absolutely colossal, breathtakingly intricate cake. The official wedding cake for Charles and Diana was a monumental creation by David Avery, the head baker at the Royal Naval Cookery School. It was a traditional fruitcake, as expected, but its size was legendary: Hoboskat 5 tiers, Sharnan standing over 5 feet tall, and weighing a staggering 25 pounds. This wasn't just a dessert, it was a vertical landscape of sugary artistry, a focal point that perfectly encapsulated the grandeur and romantic idealism of the fairy tale wedding. Imagine trying to transport that monster without a single crack in the royal icing. An authoritative historical fact, due to its immense size and complexity, several backup cakes were made in case of disaster, highlighting the high stakes and logistical challenges involved in creating such a central piece of the royal celebration. The design of Diana's cake was a masterful blend of traditional royal symbols and personal touches. It was adorned with intricate royal icing decorations, including the royal coat of arms, the Prince of Wales's feathers, and the couple's interwoven initials C and D. But beyond these standard elements, the cake featured an array of delicate sugar paste flowers, roses, lilies of the valley, and of course the ever-present orange blossoms. These weren't just randomly placed, they formed elegant garlands and intricate sprays that cascaded down the pristine white tiers. You might also have spotted tiny, exquisite sugar figurines representing the couple's interests or the symbols of their regiments. A quirky fact among the detailed decorations were miniature edible models of swans, symbolic of loyalty, and even small edible sugar horses, reflecting Diana's love for equestrian pursuits. Every tiny detail was meticulously considered. The creation of the cake was a monumental undertaking, requiring weeks of preparation and a team of bakers and decorators working tirelessly. The fruitcake itself, robust and rich, provided the necessary foundation for the elaborate royal icing work. The cake became a symbol of the dazzling public image of the royal family in the early 1980s, reflecting a renewed interest and affection for the monarchy. Historians still argue whether the extreme opulence and fairy tale narrative surrounding Diana's wedding, including her cake, set an unrealistic precedent for public expectations of royal life, or if it simply reflected the aspirational mood of the nation at the time. Whatever its long-term implications, Princess Diana's wedding cake stands as one of the most iconic royal confections in history, a towering masterpiece of traditional craftsmanship and romantic symbolism, capturing the hopeful spirit of a world watching a princess marry her prince. It was less a cake and more a delicious dream perfectly crafted for a global audience. You've just marveled at the sheer grandeur of Princess Diana's iconic wedding cake, a true masterpiece of edible art. But what happens to a royal wedding cake after the grand reception? You might assume it's simply eaten, but for centuries a peculiar and fascinating tradition has persisted: the Hof cake preservation of royal slices. This isn't just about saving a keepsake. It's a curious practice, steeped in superstition, sentimentality, and a dash of historical curiosity. Imagine receiving a small, elegantly boxed slice of a royal wedding cake, perhaps years after the event. These aren't just dry crumbs. They are often miniature pieces of the very dense fruit cake, typically still encased in a layer of royal icing carefully preserved. The tradition of keeping portions of royal wedding cakes is long-standing, with slices being distributed to special guests, dignitaries, and even sometimes auctioned off years later, often fetching surprisingly high prices. It's like owning a piece of history you could technically maybe eat, if you were brave enough. An authoritative historical fact, a slice of Queen Victoria's 1840 wedding cake was sold at auction in 2017 for $1,500, demonstrating the enduring value placed on these historical edibles. Why preserve cake? Several reasons contribute to this peculiar custom. Historically, fruitcake, due to its high alcohol and sugar content, is exceptionally well preserved. This natural longevity made it ideal for sending to distant relatives or for keeping as a memento without fear of rapid decay. Beyond practicality, there's a strong element of superstition. It was once believed that placing a slice of wedding cake under one's pillow would bring dreams of your future spouse, particularly for unmarried guests. For others, simply owning a piece of the royal cake was considered a good luck charm, a tangible link to a blessed and auspicious event. Imagine trying to get a good night's sleep with a rock-hard piece of cake under your head. Talk about a stiff neck for good luck. The top tier of the official wedding cake was often specifically designed and preserved for a distinct future event, the christening of the couple's first child. This particular tier would be carefully stored sometimes for over a year and then brought out to be shared at the christening ceremony, symbolizing the continuity of the family line and the blessings bestowed upon the new generation. This tradition beautifully links the joyous union of the parents to the welcoming of their offspring, a sweet echo across time. A quirky fact, due to the preservation techniques, some royal cake slices have been kept for over 100 years. While technically edible experts strongly advise against tasting them after such a long time unless you have a truly adventurous palate and a very strong stomach. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for preserving these slices was genuinely superstitious belief, a practical need to share commemorative tokens widely, or simply an early form of royal memorabilia. Whatever the reason, this charming, if slightly eccentric tradition continues, allowing a physical piece of these grand royal celebrations to endure long after the last dance. It's a reminder that even the most fleeting of moments can leave a lasting edible legacy. You've just learned about the intriguing practice of preserving royal wedding cake slices, a sweet link between generations and a nod to historical superstition. But while the main towering fruitcake usually grabs all the headlines, many royal weddings, particularly in recent centuries, have quietly featured a lesser-known but equally fascinating confection, the secondary cake, often referred to as the groom's cake, tamranijos. Imagine a wedding where there's a magnificent main event, and then off to the side a slightly more casual, perhaps even quirky edible companion. The tradition of a groom's cake is deeply rooted in Southern American culture, but it made its way into British royal circles, offering a delightful counterpoint to the formality of the primary wedding cake. This secondary cake is typically smaller, less ornate, and often reflects the groom's personal tastes, hobbies, or even a sense of humor rather than the grand dynastic symbolism of the main cake. It's his moment to shine in the confectionery spotlight, often with a theme far removed from white royal icing and orange blossoms. Historians still argue whether the groom's cake was initially introduced to royal weddings as a nod to American influences, or simply as a practical way to offer more dessert options to a vast guest list. Unlike the traditional fruitcake, the groom's cake often features flavors more appealing to modern palates or indeed the groom's particular cravings. You might find chocolate cake, sponge cake, or even a different type of fruitcake entirely. Its design, too, is typically more relaxed and playful. Imagine a groom's cake shaped like a favorite sports stadium, a beloved pet, or even a subtle nod to a military regiment. It's a chance for a bit of edible whimsy amidst the otherwise stately proceedings. A quirky fact, some grooms' cakes have been known to be quite abstract, perhaps a dark chocolate concoction that looks more like a modern sculpture than a traditional cake, reflecting artistic inclinations of the royal groom. These secondary cakes often serve a more immediate purpose, being served at a more informal pre-wedding gathering or as part of a smaller, more intimate reception. They offer a taste alternative for guests who might not be keen on traditional fruitcake. Yes, even royals have their preferences and provide an additional touch of personalized festivity. You might find a groom's cake decorated with dark chocolate ganache, offering a rich, decadent contrast to the crisp, bright white of the main cake. While the main wedding cake is a symbol of the couple's united public image and dynastic continuity, the groom's cake provides a glimpse into the personality of one half of the royal duo. It's a charming tradition that acknowledges individual tastes within the grand spectacle of a royal union. It highlights that even in the most formal of ceremonies, there's always room for a little personal flair, a touch of unexpected flavor, and perhaps a subtle hint of the groom's true passions, all baked into a delightful, if less celebrated, confection. It reminds you that even royalty enjoys a good chocolate cake now and then. From the delightful diversion of the groom's cake, we return to the main attraction, exploring how royal wedding cakes have evolved beyond simple sugar and flour to embrace modern materials and cutting-edge edible artistry. You're now stepping into an era where confectioners have access to an expanded palette of ingredients and techniques, transforming cakes into truly intricate, often breathtaking edible sculptures. Imagine the shift from painting with broad brushes to having an entire array of fine tools and vibrant pigments at your disposal. The most significant development has been the widespread use of muak sugar paste, also known as fondant or rolled icing. While earlier royal cakes relied heavily on royal icing, a harder, crisper frosting made from egg whites and powdered sugar paste offers a completely different medium. It's a pliable, dough-like substance that can be rolled out smoothly draped over cakes for a flawless finish and crucially molded and sculpted into incredibly intricate shapes. This allows for a level of detail that was previously impossible. An authoritative historical fact, while early forms of pliable sugar paste existed, its widespread adoption and refinement as a primary decorating medium for elaborate cakes truly took off in the 20th century, allowing for softer, more intricate designs than the more brittle royal icing. Imagine delicate sugar flowers so lifelike you might mistake them for real blooms, each petal individually formed and tinted, or intricate lace patterns so fine they appear spun from silk, yet entirely edible. Sugar paste allows confectioners to create virtually anything: realistic foliage, delicate ribbons, intricate coats of arms, and even tiny expressive figures, all with a smooth, professional finish. You could practically spend an hour admiring the miniature garden on a single tier before even considering taking a slice. A quirky fact, some master decorators can even create sugar paste portraits, so detailed you might accidentally try to frame them instead of eat them. Talk about a cake that stares back. Beyond sugar paste, other edible mediums have come into play. Edible paints and barn dusts, often made from food-grade dyes and shimmering mica, allow for a new level of color and metallic sheen, adding depth and realism to decorations. Isomalt. A sugar substitute can be heated and molded into clear glass-like structures, perfect for creating edible gems, delicate sugar sculptures, or even transparent windows in cake designs. These modern materials enable confectioners to achieve visual effects that would have been unimaginable just a century ago. The shift towards these new materials also means a slightly different texture for the cake's exterior. While royal icing is crisp and firm, sugar paste is softer and more pliable, often with a subtle satiny sheen. This allows for cleaner lines and more fluid designs. Historians still argue whether the move towards softer, more sculptable mediums represents a decline in traditional royal icing artistry, or simply a natural evolution in confectionery techniques offering new possibilities for edible art. Regardless, these modern materials have transformed royal wedding cakes into true masterpieces of edible artistry, blurring the lines between dessert and museum-worthy sculpture, all while maintaining the essence of a centuries-old tradition. You've just explored how modern materials have revolutionized the intricate artistry of royal wedding cakes. Now let's delve into one of the most astonishing expressions of this edible craftsmanship: cakes transformed into architectural wonders. You're entering a realm where confectioners don't just decorate cakes, they construct miniature edible replicas of famous buildings, grand palaces, or even significant family estates. Imagine commissioning a cake that isn't merely delicious, but also a scale model of your actual wedding venue. This trend of creating cakes as architectural models showcases an extraordinary blend of baking sculpture and meticulous historical or structural accuracy. These aren't just vaguely shaped cakes. They often feature incredibly precise details, from tiny sugar windows and doors to intricate facades and realistic textures, all rendered in edible materials. The confectioner becomes part engineer, part historian, and part sculptor, painstakingly recreating beloved landmarks in sugar paste and royal icing. An authoritative historical fact, the trend of cakes replicating architectural structures gained significant popularity in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, often reflecting the grandeur of the British Empire or the specific royal residences. Imagine a cake that perfectly replicates Buckingham Palace, complete with its iconic facade and perhaps even tiny edible flags. Or a smaller, more intimate cake that meticulously details the ancestral home of one of the royal families down to the last sugar paste chimney. These edible buildings are often multi-tiered, with each tier representing a different section or floor of the building, adding to the illusion of scale and complexity. The colors would be chosen to match the actual stone or brickwork, often using subtle edible dusts to create a weathered or realistic effect. A quirky fact, some bakers would even incorporate edible lighting within these architectural cakes, giving them a magical glow during the reception, as if the tiny windows were truly illuminated. Imagine the guests' delight at seeing a glowing edible castle. Creating such intricate models requires not only immense artistic talent, but also a deep understanding of structural integrity. Confectioners must plan out the internal supports meticulously, ensuring that the sugar walls and roofs don't buckle under their own weight. This often involves hidden dowels, internal frameworks, and very dense cake bases, typically still the ever-reliable fruitcake, to bear the weight of the sugary edifice. The precision needed to carve and sculpt these details, ensuring they are perfectly scaled and proportioned, is astonishing. These architectural cakes serve as powerful symbols. They represent the stability and continuity of the royal family, echoing the enduring nature of the buildings they replicate. They also offer a deeply personal touch, transforming a significant location into a memorable edible centerpiece for the most important day. Historians still argue whether these architectural cakes were primarily a display of royal wealth and power, or if they served as a more sentimental tribute to beloved places and ancestral connections. Regardless, these edible wonders stand as a testament to the boundless creativity of royal confectioners, proving that a cake can be much more than just a dessert. It can be a miniature temporary monument to history and love. You've just explored the architectural marvels of royal wedding cakes, edible replicas of grand buildings. Now let's dig a little deeper into the very fabric of these confections, unveiling the fascinating world of hidden meanings and symbolism everywhere. You see, beyond the impressive size and intricate decorations, almost every element of a royal wedding cake is carefully chosen to convey a message, a wish, or a subtle nod to history, often with layers of significance that only the most keen-eyed or well-informed observer would discern. Imagine dissecting a cake, not just for its ingredients, but for its narrative. Every tier, every flower, every color, every motif can hold a specific meaning, turning the cake into an edible, allegorical poem. We've already touched on the orange blossom representing fertility and purity, thanks to Queen Victoria. But the symbolic lexicon extends much further. For instance, roses. Especially white ones traditionally symbolize love and purity, while our liliesbach might represent virtue or majesty. The specific type and arrangement of flowers could subtly reference the bride's bouquet, the couple's favorite blooms, or even heraldic floral emblems. An authoritative historical fact, the language of flowers or floriography was immensely popular in Victorian times and heavily influenced the choice of floral decorations on royal wedding cakes, with each bloom carrying a specific understood meaning. Beyond flowers, many cakes incorporate heraldic symbols. The royal coat of arms, the Prince of Wales' feathers, the Scottish thistle, the Irish shamrock, or the English rose. These are not just pretty patterns, they are powerful emblems of national and dynastic identity, carefully placed to reinforce the couple's connection to their heritage and their future role within the monarchy. You might see the royal cipher, the monarch's personal monogram, or the specific regimental badge of the groom, adding a personal military touch. Imagine a tiny sugar lion roaring proudly from a cake tier, symbolizing strength and courage. A quirky fact, sometimes even the number of tiers can be symbolic, often representing the number of years the couple dated, or a significant family number, though this is less common and often known only to the inner circle. The choice of mummified colors. Even within the predominantly white icing can hold meaning. While white symbolizes purity, touches of gold or silver signify wealth and regality. Subtle shades of cream or ivory might evoke tradition and softness. Even the type of icing, the hard, durable royal icing versus the smoother, more pliable sugar paste, can subtly convey a message about tradition versus modernity. These hidden meanings are often deeply personal to the couple or reflect long-standing royal traditions. They serve as a testament to the meticulous planning and thoughtful consideration that goes into every aspect of a royal wedding, ensuring that even the cake tells a story. Historians still argue whether the complexity of these symbols was fully appreciated by the general public, or if they were primarily for the delight of the court and a select few who understood their intricate language. Regardless, decoding these edible messages adds a fascinating layer to the already grand spectacle of a royal wedding cake, transforming it from mere dessert into a profound, delicious narrative of love, duty, and history. You've just peeled back the layers of hidden symbolism within royal wedding cakes. Now let's shine a spotlight on the unsung heroes behind these edible marvels, the burnt royal bakers. Imagine the immense pressure, the meticulous skill, and the sheer dedication required to transform hundreds of pounds of ingredients into a towering, flawless masterpiece, knowing that billions of eyes will be on your creation. These are the master craftsmen and craftswomen whose hands shape history, one sugary petal at a time. Becoming a royal confectioner isn't just about being good at baking. It's about being a true artisan, an engineer, and a meticulous planner. These individuals are often chosen from the most prestigious culinary schools or come with decades of experience in high-end pastry. Their role involves not just the physical act of baking and decorating, but also extensive consultation with the royal couple, understanding their vision and translating complex symbolic requests into edible art. You can almost hear the nervous whispers in the royal kitchens as the big day approaches. An authoritative historical fact, many royal wedding cakes, particularly in the 20th century, were made by teams of bakers from established institutions like the Royal Naval Cookery School or the Armed Forces Catering Corps, signifying a collective national effort rather than just a single private baker. The pressure on these bakers is immense. They are working on a strict timeline with a colossal weight of expectation. Every detail must be perfect, every layer stable, every decorative flourish flawless. There's no room for error when your cake is going to be seen by a global audience and enshrined in history. Imagine the sleepless nights, the constant worry about ingredients arriving on time, the temperature control in the baking rooms, and the delicate process of applying thousands of individual sugar paste flours without a single crack or smudge. A quirky fact: some royal bakers have reportedly used special extra-long rulers and spirit levels to ensure absolute precision when stacking tiers, treating the cake more like a skyscraper than a dessert. They were, in essence, edible architects. Their skills encompass a wide range of confectionery arts, from baking perfectly dense, moist fruitcakes that can bear immense weight to creating flawless marzipan layers, to the intricate piping of royal icing that looks like spun lace, and the delicate molding of sugar paste into lifelike figures and flowers. They must also possess a deep understanding of preservation techniques, given the fruitcake's long shelf life and the tradition of saving slices. The royal bakers often work in highly secure environments, especially as the wedding day approaches, guarding their sweet secrets until the grand reveal. Their dedication often goes uncelebrated by the wider public, but within culinary circles, they are revered. Historians still argue whether the anonymity of royal bakers outside of their immediate circles was a deliberate choice to maintain the mystique of the royal wedding, or simply a reflection of the era's focus on the monarchy rather than its service providers. Regardless, these master craftsmen are the true architects of these edible wonders, bringing dreams to life with flour sugar and an unparalleled level of skill and unwavering nerves. You've just gained an appreciation for the master craftsmen, the royal bakers, who pour their skill and nerves into creating these magnificent wedding cakes. But given the cake's prominence, their sheer value, both monetary and symbolic, and the high-profile nature of royal weddings, it's no surprise that these edible masterpieces become subjects of intense scrutiny and, perhaps more surprisingly, significant. Security concerns. You're entering a world where a cake isn't just a dessert. It's a potential target requiring measures usually reserved for precious jewels or state secrets. Imagine a towering royal wedding cake, adorned with priceless sugarwork, sitting in a grand hall surrounded by dignitaries, celebrities, and the world's media. The sheer public exposure means that security around these cakes is paramount. This isn't just about preventing a tipsy guest from taking an unauthorized nibble. It's about safeguarding against more malicious intentions, ensuring the cake remains untampered with and pristine for its grand unveiling and ceremonial cutting. An authoritative historical fact for major royal wedding security around the cake has often included 24-hour surveillance by palace guards or specialized security personnel, especially in the days leading up to and during the reception. The security measures can range from the obvious to the subtly elaborate. The ingredients themselves, particularly for cakes made in sections and transported, might be subject to strict chain of custody protocols. Bakers and decorators working on the cake in the days and weeks leading up to the wedding might undergo extensive background checks. The kitchens and assembly areas where the cake is created are often secured with access restricted to a very limited number of trusted personnel. You can imagine the intense vetting process. Have you ever tried to smuggle a rogue cherry into a royal fruitcake? State your intentions. Once assembled at the palace, the cake is typically placed in a prominent yet carefully managed location. It might be behind a velvet rope or positioned in a way that allows for viewing but prevents close physical access. Security personnel, sometimes in plain clothes, would be strategically placed to monitor the cake and the surrounding area. The fear isn't just about a physical attack, but even about tampering or contamination, however unlikely. A quirky fact: some rumors suggest that certain royal cakes might have even had dummy tiers indistinguishable from the real ones to add an extra layer of security or to make transportation easier, though this is often debated among royal watchers. These security protocols highlight the symbolic weight placed on the royal wedding cake. It's more than just a sweet treat, it's a cultural icon, a piece of living history, and its integrity must be preserved at all costs. Historians still argue whether the level of security surrounding these cakes reflects genuine threats or is simply a necessary byproduct of the immense public interest and paranoia associated with high-profile royal events. Regardless, the unseen efforts of security teams ensure that these edible monuments arrive safely, stand proudly, and remain untouched until the moment they are ceremoniously cut by the royal couple completing their journey from humble ingredients to safeguarded symbol. You've just glimpsed the hidden security protocols safeguarding royal wedding cakes. Now prepare for a truly unique instance of cake preservation that goes beyond saving a mere slice. We're delving into the extraordinary case of the Queen Mother's cake. An edible relic that was kept on display for an unusually extended period, becoming a lifelong tangible link to a cherished royal memory. You're about to encounter a level of sentimentality that turned a ceremonial confection into a permanent fixture. Imagine a piece of cake, not just a small box slice, but a significant portion of a wedding cake being retained and publicly displayed for decades. This was the destiny of a specific section of the wedding cake baked for Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon's marriage to Prince Albert, Duke of York, later King George VI, in 1923. The cake itself was a magnificent multi-tiered fruit cake weighing 800 pounds, a testament to the opulence of the era before wartime austerity. But it's what happened to a particular part of it that sets this story apart. A piece of this cake, specifically one of the upper tiers or a substantial portion, was not merely eaten or saved in a small commemorative box. It was kept largely intact and reportedly displayed at various private and public events connected to the Queen Mother throughout her incredibly long life. This wasn't just about tradition. It became a personal memento, a tangible link to her wedding day, which occurred almost 80 years before her passing in 2002. You can imagine the murmurs of awe and perhaps a touch of bewilderment from those who saw it. An authoritative historical fact, the Queen Mother herself was known for her fondness for sentimentality and tradition, and the preservation of a piece of her wedding cake for such a long duration is often cited as an example of her personal connection to royal history. The longevity of this particular cake piece is a testament to the incredibly robust nature of traditional royal fruit cake. Its dense composition, high sugar content, and the liberal use of alcohol act as natural preservatives, ensuring it remains remarkably intact over long periods, albeit perhaps not exactly fresh. The royal icing drying to a hard shell also contributed to its remarkable resilience against decay. A quirky fact, while it remained preserved, it's highly unlikely anyone ever attempted to eat this particular piece of cake after its initial years. Imagine the texture and flavor of an 80-year-old fruit cake. Definitely a curiosity, not a culinary delight. This long-term display of the Queen Mother's cake highlights a unique aspect of royal sentimentality and the power of physical objects to embody memory and history. It transcended its original purpose as a dessert to become a relic, a silent witness to decades of royal life and national history. Historians still argue whether the public knowledge of such long-term cake preservation added to the mystique of the monarchy or simply highlighted the sometimes eccentric nature of royal traditions. Regardless, the Queen Mother's enduring cake stands as a charming, if slightly unusual, testament to a lifelong connection to a singular sweet moment. You've just been introduced to the remarkable longevity of the Queen Mother's wedding cake. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most famous royal wedding cakes of all time, the one that captivated billions: Prince Charles and Princess Diana's. And specifically, let's look at what happened after the grand ceremony, focusing on the extensive post-wedding distribution and repurposing of their monumental cake. You see, a cake of that scale doesn't just disappear. It has a fascinating afterlife, spreading its sweet legacy far and wide. As you recall from our earlier discussion, the official cake for Charles and Diana's 1981 wedding was a 5-foot-tall, 5-tiered fruit cake weighing 225 pounds. This wasn't the only cake, however. There were a remarkable 27 other cakes commissioned for the wedding, including several identical backup cakes in case of disaster, and numerous smaller cakes sent to different reception venues or military regiments. This massive production meant that there was a tremendous amount of cake to go around, far more than could be consumed by the immediate wedding guests. An authoritative historical fact, the sheer number of auxiliary cakes for Prince Charles and Princess Diana's wedding was unprecedented, demonstrating the immense scale of the event and the desire to share the celebration widely. So what became of all this sugary abundance? Much of it was meticulously sliced and packaged for distribution. Dignitaries, members of the royal household, military personnel, and even specific charities or individuals who had contributed to the wedding, like those who sent well wishes or small gifts, received carefully wrapped slices as commemorative tokens. Imagine getting a small, elegant box in the mail containing a piece of the royal wedding cake, a tangible piece of history delivered right to your door. It was a charming way to extend the reach of the celebration and share a piece of the magic with a wider public. Beyond direct distribution, some portions of the cake, particularly pieces from the main cake or its replicas, would be held for future significant family events such as the christenings of the couple's children. This honored the tradition of the top tier being saved for such occasions, ensuring that the cake's symbolism carried forward. A quirky fact, it's rumored that some of the smaller undisplayed cakes were simply consumed by palace staff and security details in the days following the wedding, a well-deserved treat after months of high-stress planning and execution. Imagine having royal wedding cake as a casual office snack. The repurposing and widespread distribution of Charles and Diana's cake exemplified the public nature of royal weddings. These weren't private affairs, they were national, even global celebrations. The cake therefore became a medium for sharing that celebration, a sweet gesture of inclusion that allowed many more people than just those present at the reception to feel a direct connection to the event. Historians still argue whether the extensive distribution of royal wedding cake slices was a genuine act of generosity or a carefully orchestrated public relations move to cement public affection for the monarchy. Regardless, the delicious legacy of Charles and Diana's cake extended far beyond the confines of Buckingham Palace, leaving a sweet, memorable mark on countless individuals. You've just seen how Prince Charles and Princess Diana's cake had a fascinating afterlife. Now let's fast forward to a royal wedding that perfectly blended centuries of tradition with a distinctly modern sensibility, the marriage of Prince William and Catherine Middleton. In 2011, you witnessed a grand spectacle steeped in regal splendor, yet touched by contemporary choices, and their wedding cakes were a perfect reflection of this fascinating blend of franchement, traditional meets modern. Unlike some previous royal weddings that featured just one dominant cake, William and Catherine opted for two distinct centerpieces, showcasing both their respect for tradition and their individual preferences. This two-cake approach became a significant talking point, illustrating the evolving tastes within the monarchy, while still honoring deeply ingrained customs. The primary official wedding cake was, as expected, a magnificent traditional fruitcake, created by Fiona Cairns. This towering 8-tiered masterpiece stood at over 3 feet tall and was adorned with an astounding 900 individual sugar paste flowers. Every single bloom, from roses to thistles and shamrocks representing the 4 nations of the UK, was intricately crafted by hand, symbolizing both their personal preferences and the unity of the United Kingdom. The traditional royal icing, that pristine white shell, covered the cake, and it featured delicate lace patterns inspired by Catherine's wedding dress, adding a deeply personal and elegant touch. An authoritative historical fact, the official wedding cake for Prince William and Catherine Middleton prominently featured the language of flowers, with each sugar bloom meticulously chosen for its symbolic meaning, continuing a tradition popularized by Queen Victoria. However, in a significant departure from tradition, Prince William also commissioned a secondary groom's cake. That was far more unconventional. This cake was a chow chocolate biscuit cake, a personal childhood favorite of William's, made from a recipe provided by McVitie's. It was much smaller, uniced, and featured a simpler yet still elegant design. This choice highlighted William's personal taste and a relaxed approach, providing a familiar and comforting treat for the royal couple and their guests. Imagine the surprise of guests used to towering fruitcakes when they saw a delicious, unassuming chocolate biscuit cake beside it. A truly delightful modern touch. A quirky fact, the chocolate biscuit cake was reportedly so simple to make that it didn't even require baking, relying on crushed digestive biscuits and chocolate ganache, making it a surprisingly humble choice for a royal groom. This dual cake approach for William and Catherine effectively bridged the gap between the past and the present. The fruitcake paid homage to centuries of royal tradition, symbolizing continuity and duty, while the chocolate biscuit cake offered a glimpse into their personal preferences and a more contemporary, relatable side of the monarchy. Historians still argue whether the choice of two distinct cakes was a deliberate public relations strategy to portray modernity or simply a genuine reflection of the couple's desire to incorporate both formal and informal elements into their celebration. Whatever the interpretation, William and Catherine's wedding cakes provided a delicious and visually compelling example of how royal traditions can adapt and evolve without losing their inherent grandeur. You've just seen how Prince William and Catherine Middleton embraced both tradition and modernity with their two distinct wedding cakes. Now prepare for an even bolder step into contemporary royal confectionery with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding cake. Their marriage in 2018 marked a significant departure from centuries of royal cake tradition, opting for a design and flavor profile that was distinctly fresh, environmentally conscious, and wonderfully unconventional. Imagine expecting a grand classic symphony and instead getting a delightful, unexpected jazz piece. Breaking away from the ubiquitous royal fruitcake, Harry and Meghan chose a Yewandod lemon elderflower cake. With a light sponge filled with elderflower syrup and lemon curd and frosted with buttercream. This choice was a revolutionary one in royal wedding cake history, as it completely eschewed the traditional dense fruitcake that had dominated for over 170 years since Queen Victoria. It was a conscious decision to reflect their modern tastes and perhaps a more relaxed, informal approach to royal life. You can almost hear the collective gasp from traditionalists when the flavor was announced. An authoritative historical fact, this choice of a non-fruitcake, fresh-flavored cake marked the most significant break from royal wedding cake tradition in modern British history, setting a new precedent for future royal couples. The cake was created by Claire Patak, an American baker based in London who championed organic and seasonal ingredients. This selection further emphasized the couple's commitment to modern values and perhaps a more laid-back aesthetic, aligning with their personal brand and Meghan's Californian roots. The cake itself was designed to be much less formal in appearance than previous royal confections. Instead of pristine, hard royal icing, it featured a rustic, naturalistic buttercream finish. It wasn't a towering, perfectly smooth edifice, it was more like a stack of beautifully decorated, slightly imperfect garden blooms. The decoration was equally fresh and organic. It was adorned with fresh peonies and roses, Meghan's favorite flowers, and drizzled with a simple, elegant elderflower syrup. There were no intricate royal monograms, no detailed heraldic crests, and no elaborate sugar paste architectural elements. The beauty lay in its natural simplicity, its fresh flavors, and its charming, understated elegance. Imagine a cake that looked like it had just been gathered from a sun-drenched meadow, rather than meticulously constructed in a palace kitchen. A quirky fact due to the light, fresh nature of the sponge and buttercream, this cake would not have the decades-long shelf life of the traditional royal fruitcakes, underscoring its break from old preservation customs. Harry and Meghan's wedding cake was a powerful statement. It symbolized a shift towards a more contemporary monarchy, one that embraced personal preferences, organic living, and a less rigid interpretation of tradition. It was a clear signal that while they honored the institution, they were also keen to infuse it with their own unique style and values. Historians still argue whether this departure from tradition was a sign of the monarchy's adaptability or an indication of a growing divergence from established royal customs. Regardless, their cake was a delicious, fragrant, and visually unconventional masterpiece that truly stood out, proving that even a royal wedding cake can be a powerful emblem of change. You've just witnessed Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's refreshingly unconventional cake, a modern twist on a centuries-old tradition. But it's important to remember that royal wedding cakes aren't solely a British phenomenon. Our journey now takes us beyond the shores of the United Kingdom, exploring the truly diverse and often equally magnificent confections from Marmon non-British royal weddings, revealing a world of global glories in confectionery that are just as steeped in tradition, symbolism, and sometimes outright strangeness. Imagine the sheer variety from the intricate marzipan creations of Scandinavia to the vibrant spice-infused cakes of Middle Eastern monarchies. Each royal wedding cake outside of Britain reflects the unique cultural heritage, culinary traditions, and aesthetic preferences of its specific monarchy. While Britain solidified the fruitcake tradition, other nations embraced different flavors, structures, and decorative motifs, creating a fascinating tapestry of edible art. An authoritative historical fact, European royal families often intermarried for centuries, leading to shared customs, but their wedding cakes retained distinct national characteristics reflecting local ingredients and artistic styles. Take, for instance, the grand royal weddings in Europe. The Swedish royal family, for example, often features towering cakes made of kransekake, a traditional Norwegian and Danish almond-based ring cake stacked into a conical tower. It's naturally gluten-free and has a chewy texture, a far cry from British fruitcake. Imagine a cake that looks like a beautiful edible stack of golden rings, sometimes adorned with tiny national flags or sugar figures. A quirky fact: kransekake is often decorated with small edible marzipan figures of swans or cherubs, making it both festive and charmingly traditional. Move further afield, and the diversity deepens. Some Middle Eastern royal weddings might feature incredibly elaborate cakes infused with rosewater pistachios or cardamom, often covered in shimmering edible gold leaf and adorned with complex geometric patterns or calligraphic designs. These cakes might be more about sweet aromatic flavors and intricate surface decoration than the towering height seen in British tradition. Imagine a cake shimmering with gold, a true jewel of confectionery, fragrant with exotic spices. Japanese imperial weddings, while less public, traditionally favor simpler, elegant rice cakes or steamed sweets, reflecting a different cultural emphasis on minimalism and natural flavors, far removed from the Western concept of a multi-tiered cake. The symbolism is often in the purity of the ingredients and the simplicity of the presentation. These international royal cakes demonstrate that while the British tradition is iconic, it is but one thread in a rich global tapestry of royal confectionery. Each cake is a culinary ambassador speaking volumes about its nation's history, its artistic sensibilities, and its unique way of celebrating a royal union. Historians still argue whether the influence of British royal wedding cakes on other monarchies was primarily aesthetic, or if it reflected deeper political and cultural ties forged over centuries. Regardless, these diverse global glories remind you that every kingdom, every royal couple, adds its own distinct, delicious chapter to the grand history of royal wedding cakes. You've just taken a delicious tour of non-British royal cakes, showcasing the global diversity of royal confectionery. Now let's sprinkle a little magic and mystery onto our journey by exploring the fascinating world of royal cake superstitions. You see, these grand confections weren't just for eating. For centuries, they were steeped in folklore, believed to bring good luck, ensure fertility, or even reveal glimpses of the future. Imagine a time when every crumb held a hidden charm, and every slice was a prophecy. One of the most widespread and enduring superstitions revolved around good luck. It was widely believed that consuming a piece of royal wedding cake, especially if you were a wedding guest, would bring you good fortune, happiness, and even ensure a prosperous marriage if you were already wed. This belief extended beyond the reception itself, fueling the tradition of sending out cake slices to those who couldn't attend, ensuring they too could partake in the auspicious blessings. An authoritative historical fact, the distribution of wedding cake slices, particularly to unmarried women as a means of invoking good luck for finding a spouse, dates back centuries in various European cultures, long before it became a royal prerogative. For unmarried women in particular, the royal wedding cake held a special allure. The most common and charming superstition involved placing a piece of the cake, chakar, under their pillow on the wedding night. The belief was that doing so would lead to dreams of their future husband. Imagine the hopeful anticipation the quiet ritual performed in the grand chambers of a palace or a humble home, all for a glimpse of matrimonial destiny. A quirky fact, some young women would even sleep with the cake slice in a stocking or tied with ribbon to ensure it didn't fall out during the night. Presumably because finding a crumbled piece of royal cake on the floor in the morning was hardly a sign of good luck. Beyond romantic fortunes, the cake was also believed to confer blessings of fertility and abundance upon the newlywed couple. The rich fruit cake itself, packed with diverse fruits, was often seen as a symbol of fruitfulness and a large, healthy family. The act of cutting the cake together by the bride and groom was not just a photo opportunity. It was a ritual symbolizing their first joint act as a married couple, a shared commitment to their future and their ability to cut through life's challenges together. Sometimes pieces of the cake might even be crumbled over the heads of the couple or guests for extra blessings, though this practice was more common in earlier, less refined periods. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were deeply held religious beliefs, charming folk customs, or simply playful traditions designed to add to the festive atmosphere of the wedding. Regardless, they illustrate the profound symbolic power attributed to the royal wedding cake, transforming it from a mere confection into a potent vessel of hope, magic, and destiny. The cake was not just a sweet ending to a grand day. It was a tangible link to a world of hidden meanings, a delicious promise of future happiness, carefully crafted and consumed with an eye towards a charmed life. You've indulged in the charming superstitions surrounding royal wedding cakes. Now let's peel back the pristine layers of royal icing and delve into a topic that often remains discreetly unmentioned: the true cost of confectionery. You see, these edible masterpieces are not just a labor of love. They are incredibly expensive undertakings, reflecting not just the ingredients and skill, but the immense prestige and global symbolism associated with a royal union. Imagine a dessert with a price tag that could buy you a house. The cost of a royal wedding cake is astronomical, far beyond what any typical couple would spend. This isn't surprising when you consider the sheer scale, the bespoke design, the intricate hand craftsmanship, and the use of the highest quality and often rarest ingredients. These cakes are not mass-produced. They are singular works of art commissioned from top-tier bakers who dedicate weeks, sometimes months, exclusively to their creation. An authoritative historical fact: Prince William and Catherine Middleton's elaborate fruitcake came in at approximately $80,000, around $100,000 USD, while Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's lemon elderflower cake reportedly cost around $50,000, roughly $70,000 USD at the time. Queen Victoria's 1840 cake was noted as costing over $100, which adjusted for inflation would be tens of thousands of pounds today. So what drives these eye-watering prices? It's a combination of several factors. Ingredients. While basic flour and sugar are cheap, the sheer volume of premium quality ingredients required is immense. Think hundreds of pounds of organic dried fruits soaked in expensive spirits, the finest butter, and countless fresh lemons or elderflower blossoms for modern choices. For the sheer scale, bakers aren't just popping to the local corner shop, they're sourcing from specialized suppliers for bulk, high-grade produce. Labor and skill. This is perhaps the largest component of the cost. You're paying for weeks of expert labor from a team of highly skilled confectioners, including master bakers, structural engineers in disguise, and artists specializing in sugar work. Their time precision and unique expertise are invaluable. Imagine paying by the hour for every tiny sugar paste flour. The bill adds up quickly. They're not just baking, they're sculpting engineering and painting with edible materials under immense pressure. Design complexity. A bespoke, multi-tiered cake with intricate royal icing, lacework, hand-painted details, or edible architectural models demands countless hours of artistic application. Every gilded flourish and meticulously placed sugar paste emblem contributes to the overall expense. Think of the hundreds of tiny individually crafted flowers, each requiring delicate handling and placement. Exclusivity and prestige. Simply being chosen to bake a royal wedding cake adds an inherent premium. The baker gains immense prestige, and the client, the royal family, pays for that level of unparalleled service and the guarantee of perfection for such a high-profile event. There's also the element of confidentiality and security that adds to the operational cost for the bakery, often requiring staff to sign non-disclosure agreements. A quirky fact: it's not unheard of for royal bakers to practice individual decorative elements hundreds of times before the final application, ensuring absolute perfection for such a public spectacle. Logistics. As we discussed, transporting and assembling these colossal cakes is a major operation, often requiring specialized equipment, dedicated vehicles, and a full team, all factored into the final price. Sometimes even a police escort for particularly large or vulnerable cakes. These astonishing costs highlight that royal wedding cakes are far more than just desserts. They are grand statements of wealth status and the boundless significance of the royal institution itself. Historians still argue whether such extravagant spending on wedding cakes is justifiable given the public funding associated with monarchies, or if it serves a vital cultural role in maintaining national identity and providing a sense of grandeur. Regardless of the debate, the immense financial investment in these edible masterpieces underscores their enduring importance as central symbolic elements of the most significant royal celebrations. You've explored the wild frontiers of modern experimental brewing and the quirky concoctions of the past. Now let's travel the world, immersing ourselves in regional oddities. The unique, culturally specific ingredients that have found their way into localized historical beer traditions. You see, long before global supply chains, brewers used what was available, leading to some truly singular and often strange brews that tell a story of place necessity and ingenuity. Imagine a beverage shaped by the very landscape and culture of its origin. Think of indigenous brewing practices in various parts of the world where the concept of beer as a barley and hops beverage was entirely foreign. In certain parts of South America, particularly among indigenous communities, beers known as chicha have been traditionally brewed from maize corn. But it's not just about the corn. A key, fascinating, and somewhat unsettling ingredient in some historical chicha preparations was human saliva. Traditionally, women would chew the maize kernels, mixing them with saliva, and then spit the chewed pulp into the brewing vessel. The enzymes in the saliva amylase would break down the starches in the corn into fermentable sugars, a process called saccharification, effectively replacing the malting process found in European brewing. An authoritative historical fact, the use of chewed maize or other starchy plants for enzymatic conversion in brewing known as saliva-assisted fermentation is a documented ancient practice in several pre-Columbian South American cultures, particularly for chicha. Imagine the taste, a thick, cloudy, often tart beverage with an undeniable earthy corn flavor, and perhaps a subtle, unique tang from the salivary enzymes. It was a vital source of nutrition and played a significant role in communal ceremonies and rituals. A quirky fact, while the idea might seem unappetizing to modern sensibilities, these traditional chichas were, and in some places still are, considered sacred beverages embodying cultural heritage and ancestral practices. It really makes you appreciate the convenience of modern malting. In Africa, a vast continent with diverse brewing traditions, you'd find a myriad of regional oddities. Beyond the common use of sorghum and millet, some communities historically incorporated various local fruits, wild roots, or even specific types of tree bark for their unique flavors, colors, or purported medicinal properties. In parts of East Africa, for example, certain traditional brews might use roasted banana or plantain for their sugar content, and distinct fruity notes, creating a sweet and cloudy beverage unlike anything you'd find in Europe. And in some remote European villages, even after the widespread adoption of hops, very local ingredients persisted. In parts of Indi, Russia, and Eastern Europe, for instance, some traditional kvass, a fermented beverage often considered a non-alcoholic beer, recipes sometimes included rye breadcrumbs, mint, or even dried fruit. Like apples and pears, in addition to the rye malt, creating a unique, tangy, and refreshing drink. These additions were about maximizing local resources and creating a distinct regional character. These regional oddities remind us that beer at its heart is a reflection of its environment and its people. Brewers, driven by necessity, local abundance, or cultural practice, would experiment with whatever was at hand, creating a truly global tapestry of fermented beverages. Historians still argue whether the development of such unique regional ingredients was purely opportunistic, or if specific cultural and spiritual beliefs also influenced their inclusion. Regardless, these diverse and sometimes baffling additions highlight the boundless creativity and adaptability of human beings when it comes to brewing their beloved beverages. You've explored the wild frontiers of modern experimental brewing and the quirky concoctions of the past. Now let's travel the world, immersing ourselves in regional oddities, the unique culturally specific ingredients that have found their way into localized historical beer traditions. You see, long before global supply chains, brewers used what was available, leading to some truly singular and often strange brews that tell a story of place necessity and ingenuity. Imagine a beverage shaped by the very landscape and culture of its origin. Think of indigenous brewing practices in various parts of the world, where the concept of beer as a barley and hops beverage was entirely foreign. In certain parts of South America, particularly among indigenous communities, beers known as chicha have been traditionally brewed from maize corn. Me not. But it's not just about the corn. A key, fascinating, and somewhat unsettling ingredient in some historical chicha preparations was human saliva. Traditionally, women would chew the maize kernels, mixing them with saliva, and then spit the chewed pulp into the brewing vessel. The enzymes in the saliva amylase would break down the starches in the corn into fermentable sugars, a process called saccharification, effectively replacing the malting process found in European brewing. An authoritative historical fact, The use of chewed maize or other starchy plants for enzymatic conversion in brewing, known as saliva-assisted fermentation, is a documented ancient practice in several pre-Columbian South American cultures, particularly for chicha. Imagine the taste: a thick, cloudy, often tart beverage with an undeniable earthy corn flavor and perhaps a subtle, unique tang from the salivary enzymes. It was a vital source of nutrition and played a significant role in communal ceremonies and rituals. A quirky fact: while the idea might seem unappetizing to modern sensibilities, these traditional chichas were, and in some places still are, considered sacred beverages embodying cultural heritage and ancestral practices. It really makes you appreciate the convenience of modern malting. In Africa, a vast continent with diverse brewing traditions, you'd find a myriad of regional oddities. Beyond the common use of sorghum and millet, some communities historically incorporated various local fruits, wild roots, or even specific types of tree bark for their unique flavors, colors, or purported medicinal properties. In parts of East Africa, for example, certain traditional brews might use roasted banana or plantain for their sugar content and distinct fruity notes, creating a sweet and cloudy beverage unlike anything you'd find in Europe. And in some remote European villages, even after the widespread adoption of hops, very local ingredients persisted. In parts of Russia and Eastern Europe, for instance, some traditional kvass, a fermented beverage often considered a non-alcoholic beer, recipes sometimes included rye breadcrumbs, mint, or even dried fruit. Like apples and pears, in addition to the rye malt, creating a unique, tangy, and refreshing drink. These additions were about maximizing local resources and creating a distinct regional character. These regional oddities remind us that beer at its heart is a reflection of its environment and its people. Brewers, driven by necessity, local abundance, or cultural practice, would experiment with whatever was at hand, creating a truly global tapestry of fermented beverages. Historians still argue whether the development of such unique regional ingredients was purely opportunistic, or if specific cultural and spiritual beliefs also influenced their inclusion. Regardless, these diverse and sometimes baffling additions highlight the boundless creativity and adaptability of human beings when it comes to brewing their beloved beverages. Word count 1118, and so, as the last bubbles of our historical brew settle, we close our eyes on a world where beer was a truly wild, ever-evolving concoction. From ancient grains chewed by human hands to the bitter herbs of medieval forests, from the smoky notes of peat to the surprising tang of a chili pepper, the journey of beer ingredients has been a long, strange, and endlessly inventive one. It's a testament to human ingenuity born of necessity, curiosity, and that enduring desire for a little something extra in their daily pint. The clinking of ancient clay vessels and the hum of modern craft breweries blend into a single soothing sound, a testament to beer's timeless appeal. The flavors, once shocking, now simply fade into the gentle quiet of the night, leaving behind a comforting sense of history, gently brewed. Feel the soft hum of the fan, the steady rhythm of your own breath, as the last images of those bizarre brews begin to soften at the edges of your mind. Now, rest well, sweet dreams.